Okay, in this lesson today, we're going to talk about interval notation. Up to this point in time, we've only discussed set builder notation and roster form. This is another notation that we're going to be using throughout the school year. Let's first take note of these two little dots here up at the top right-hand corner. We might be familiar with these from inequalities, from learning these in the past, but we know that a filled-in dot means that the graph is going to include the point. Whereas an open dot, like you see here below, is not going to be included as a point on the graph. So that's important information that we need to know. Now, let's go ahead and look at the first graph on the left here, because I have all the answers and I just kind of want to explain how this works. So what we're going to be doing with interval notation is just representing the domain and range in another form. So you can see that if we looked at the graph of this first example, we've always talked about that anytime you have a linear equation or a linear function that goes on and on in the opposite directions forever and ever, if it's a line, it's always going to have a domain and range where x and y exist in the reals, meaning that there is a domain and range value for every value. Well, to represent that using interval notation, we're going to be using the infinity symbol. So here's how to do it. The domain is going to be negative infinity all the way up to infinity. Same thing for the range, negative infinity up to infinity. Now, I want you to take note of my little note here at the bottom. Infinity symbols always have parentheses next to them. And the reason is infinity is not a finite number. It's just a theory. It's a direction. So it's always going to have parentheses. Now, go ahead and remember that, and we're going to kind of move on to the next one. You're going to be able to see this come into play. Okay, so let's look at this next one. The next one, you can see that my domain values, if I draw those little lines again, I could do my lowest domain value is going to be right here, and then my highest domain value is going to be right here. So that's going to give me that little point right there is -5, and then that high point right there is going to be 3. So my domain exists everywhere between -5 and 3. If you remember from set notation, we would represent that by saying x such that -5 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 3. Well, that's one notation. Here's another notation, much easier. Notice how those 2 points are filled in. That means that the 2 dots are included. We're going to indicate that the point is included by this symbol here. It's called a little bracket. And so we say that -5 is included, comma, all the way up to 3 with another bracket because that point is included. And that's it. You're done with your domain. Now let's go ahead and look at the range values. Same idea, where we have our lowest domain value is right here. I'm sorry, range. I said the wrong thing. Our lowest range value is right here, which is -2 on the y-axis, and then the highest is going to be right here, which is at +3 on the y-axis. So we have the lowest is -2 and the highest is +3. You can see that those 2 coordinates are included, so we're going to be using our brackets. We're going to put our lowest domain first, and then I keep saying domain, our lowest range value and our highest range value, followed by our brackets, since it is included. All right, this one has a little mixture of both now, so let's take a look. So let me go ahead and swap my pens to my domain color. My domain is going to be my X, so I'm going to go ahead and draw those right here. There you go. Those are my highest and lowest domain values. So you can see that it's going to be -5 and 3. So you can see that that first one here, that -5 domain value, is included, but the +3 one is not. So I'm going to indicate that by using my included bracket and then my non-included parentheses. So parentheses means that the point is not included. Looking again at my range values, so let's go ahead and mark my lowest range value and my highest range value. You can see that my lowest range value is -2, and my highest range value is going to be 3. You can see that -2 is not included. And my highest range value is going to be 3, which is going to be included by the circle that's indicated that it's filled in. And that's how you figure out interval notation. It's a little complicated. Let's go ahead and figure out a couple of these together now. Let's talk about the domain value. All right, let me go ahead and change my pen color. All right, I'm working with the same graphs as we did earlier. We can see that my lowest domain value and my highest domain value are here. You can see that those two coordinates on my graphs are going to be included points. Therefore, in interval notation, I'm going to be bracket -4 all the way up to 3 with a bracket. And my range value, my highest is going to be at +2, and my lowest range value is going to be at -2. And those are going to be included values. So that's going to be -2 all the way up to 2 with 2 brackets. All right, let's kind of build ourselves up here. My domain value, my low domain value, my high domain value. You can see that those coordinates are filled in dots. So my lowest is going to be at -5. My highest is going to be at 4, and they're both going to be included with brackets. But when it comes to my range, it looks like my highest is at 4 and my lowest is at -3. So that means, and they're both included, so that's going to be -3 all the way up to +4 with 2 brackets. Okay, now let's work with some things that aren't all included. All right, let's look at this next one. My domain value here. So let's look at my lowest domain. My lowest domain is -5. And notice that that point on -5 is not included. And my highest domain value is at 0. So here's how I'm going to indicate it. I know that my lowest domain value is -5, and it is not included, so I'm going to use a parenthesis. And that's going to go all the way up to my highest domain value. And be careful not to say 4. That's not what we're looking at. We're looking at where it crosses the x-axis. And it's going to be 0. And that point is included, so that's going to use a bracket. When it comes to my range values, here's my highest point, and here's my lowest point. So my lowest point is going to be -4. And that is going to be a closed dot, so that's going to be included. My highest is going to be 5, and you can see that that point is not included, so I'm going to use parentheses. There's a lot of thinking involved here. Okay, let's go ahead and try the domain of the next one. The domain here is the absolute value, and we know that absolute value, we talked about this before, that it's going to continue on and on forever, right? Which means that it's always going to have a domain value, which means parenthesis, -infinity, all the way up to +infinity with parentheses. You always put parentheses around infinities because it is not a finite number, it's just a direction. And then my range. My lowest range value is going to be right there at 0, and then my highest is going to be, well, it's going to be forever, right? Those arrows are going to go forever, so there's no high point on my range. So that's going to be indicated. My lower one is going to be an included point of 0, and it's going to go up to infinity because it's going to go on forever. All right, I think I have, that's all the examples for that section. So we just finished up interval notation. So a great way to practice this skill is to take any graph and determine the set builder and interval notation for the graph.